No one expected the girl in bunny ears to last 5 seconds. Not on that field. Not against that horse. Not when the elites had paid to see her fall. They said she was a joke. A misfit in a thrift store dress. They didn't know she grew up taming storms in the wilds of Colorado. They didn't know the fire she carried in silence. But in the next 3 minutes, Sylvie McLean wouldn't just ride the most dangerous Mustang in the league. She'd tame it. Name it, and turn every cruel whisper into thunderous awe. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Bend, Oregon, early spring, 48 degrees 4, breezy with overcast skies. The wind came down from the Cascades with a low whisper, curling over the rooftops of Bend, Oregon, a town where snowy pines met designer boutiques and quiet mountain streets could host the loudest hearts. Vaughan Ridge Polo Grounds shimmered like a crown of glass in the gray light, its emerald fields manicured down to the last blade. Today, the grounds would welcome a storm. Not of weather, but of judgment. Sylvie McLean stepped down from the black Vaughan estate car in a simple white riding dress that barely brushed her knees. The hem, modest and fluttering, caught in the early spring breeze. She stood with the stillness of someone raised in the wilderness, shoulders relaxed, head high, even as camera shutters clicked like a distant tide. 24, tall and colt-legged, she had a raw sort of beauty that didn't shine. It smoldered. Her hair was a braid of deep russet falling down one shoulder, and atop her head sat a soft suede riding helmet with a pair of stitched bunny ears. The ears were faded now, curled at the tips, worn from years of dust and sun and memory. They had belonged to her mother, a rodeo rider with a fierce smile and a body made of calluses and hope, who died when Sylvie was 12 in a bucking accident on the family's ranch in Durango, Colorado. Since then, Sylvie had never mounted a horse without those ears. They were not just sentimental, they were sacred. She was not made for society's stages. Sylvie's hands still bore the fine scars of bridle leather and barbed wire. She'd spent more nights in barns than in bedrooms. She was practical, kind when spoken to kindly, and reserved around strangers. The type to speak more to animals than to men, unless trust had been earned, and in her experience, that rarely happened among the well-dressed. Sterling Vaughan took her hand as they approached the velvet gates of the grounds. At 27, Sterling looked every inch the jewel of Vaughan and Holloway, his family's luxury diamond empire. His raven black hair, swept back and lightly glossed, framed a face both gentle and unyielding. In a navy blue three-piece suit tailored to perfection, he walked like a man used to being obeyed. But today, his posture bent slightly. Whether from nerves or guilt, Sylvie couldn't tell. Sterling had declared their relationship only 2 nights ago at a private fundraiser for equine therapy. Cameras had been there, champagne had been flowing, and Sterling, his hand resting on the small of Sylvie's back, had said into a gold-plated microphone, "She's not a debutante, she's not a legacy, but she's the only woman I trust to ride beside me." He hadn't told her he was going to say it. The words had taken her breath, and not all in a good way. Since then, the messages had poured in, texts she wasn't meant to read, photos edited to mock her, and threats from socialites whose surnames opened doors Sylvie hadn't known existed. The Vaughan Ridge Polo Grounds loomed now, banners fluttering from the marble grandstands. As Sylvie and Sterling entered, their paths split the crowd like a knife in water. The elite were already dressed for blood. Women in custom couture and glittering riding boots turned heads toward Sylvie. Some stared. Some laughed quietly. Phones tilted in unison, recording every second. "She brought that hat," someone whispered. "With the ears." "A charity case and a cartoon cap," another said. A trio of girls in pastel polos and diamond nose rings snapped a photo of her from behind. The caption was already forming in their minds, "Field Mouse at the Polo Grounds." Sylvie caught a glimpse of one of them. Sienna Halbrook, 23, heiress to an equestrian apparel line, lean and tanned like a saddle. Her lips, thick with gloss, curled when she saw Sylvie. Sienna had once tried to court Sterling, sending him a saddle stitched in diamonds. Sylvie didn't hate her, but she knew Sienna hated her back. "Sterling, honey," Sienna said, stepping forward and ignoring Sylvie entirely. "Did you mean to bring your +1 from a petting zoo?" Sterling froze, and in that moment, Sylvie watched him choose silence. Sylvie didn't flinch. She had faced stallions that bit and kicked and charged with murder in their eyes. This was just venom in velvet, but it stung more than she expected. Still, she smiled politely and nodded, pressing her fingers into the braided handle of her riding crop like a prayer bead. Behind her, camera shutters whispered again. As they approached the rider's pavilion, another wave of whispers followed her, this time about the upcoming demonstration. Sylvie had been invited to ride in the welcome round, a traditional lap where each rider showcased their form. She had requested Stormy Velvet, a white gelding known for his calm temperament. But from a corner of the pavilion, eyes narrowed. Aurora Vaughn stood with one boot propped against the wall, a glossy black riding helmet perched at her side. Sterling's cousin and the family's top competitive rider, Aurora was 25, with the kind of blonde hair that looked expensive even wet and the arrogance of someone born holding a polo mallet. She was a perfectionist, a silver-tongued strategist in the arena and out, and she'd never liked Sylvie. "You know, we're all praying she doesn't fall flat on her ears out there," Aurora said to her friend Ivy Kensington, a petite socialite with a sharp chin and sharper voice. "Don't worry," Ivy said. "She'll trip over her own novelty hat before she even finds the saddle." Sterling said nothing again. Sylvie smiled, though her heart thudded against her ribs like a caged colt. She tightened the strap on her helmet and stepped aside to breathe. The sky above Bend was thick with clouds, the kind that always threatened rain, but rarely followed through. It mirrored the mood perfectly, bruised, expectant, watching. Somewhere in the distance, a faint neigh echoed across the field. Not all the eyes on Sylvie were cruel. Hidden in the farthest bleacher row sat Dale McLean, her father, 60, sun-creased and silver-bearded, wearing a brown duster and battered felt hat. A former cavalryman turned farrier, Dale didn't belong here, but neither did Sylvie. Yet he was here, hunched over an old phone, live stream open, eyes never blinking. And Sylvie knew one thing, she wouldn't falter. Not today. Not in front of the people who'd buried her mother's legacy under perfume and protocol. She walked on, toward the stables, toward her horse, toward the beginning of something that no one here expected, but that she'd been born for. The clouds had thickened above Bend by noon, a silvery ceiling that cast a soft gloom over Vaughan Ridge polo grounds. The wind carried the scent of lavender and turf, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk shrieked. Beneath the grandstand's polished canopies, voices mingled with camera clicks, laughter curdled with cruelty, and Sylvie McLean stood at the edge of a mistake she hadn't yet seen. At the stables, the scent of sweat and cedar filled the air. Sylvie moved between rows of stalls, the worn bunny ears of her helmet bobbing with each step. She held a small silver riding tag, number 16, and read the chart pinned to the wall. Next to her number was the name, Stormy Velvet. A white gelding known across the circuit for its calm nature, ideal for show riders and aging senators' granddaughters. Sylvie exhaled, reassured. She had ridden horses wilder than boredom itself. She wasn't here to impress, just to stay upright. Unbeknownst to her, a moment earlier, two young women had been watching her through the barn's side arch, their shadows long against the wooden siding. Aurora Vaughn stood closest to the light, her pearl-studded boots perfectly clean despite the dusty path. She had changed into a tailored riding suit, black breeches and a silk navy blouse, and now rested a manicured hand on her hip. Her eyes were the pale, sharp kind that never missed a flaw. At 25, Aurora had spent years cultivating her image, champion rider, heiress to the Vaughn legacy, and perfectionist to the point of cruelty. She had been competing since she was 6, and winning by 7. Her hatred of Sylvie wasn't just personal, it was territorial. Beside her stood Ivy Kensington, 5'2" in floral breeches and a sleeveless lavender vest embroidered with silver cranes. Ivy's voice was gentle, but her laughter was not. A childhood spent shadowed by her older brothers, wealthy financiers who ignored her existence, had made her sharp, observant, and eager to cut before being cut. While Aurora schemed with silence, Ivy preferred barbs delivered in whispers. "She thinks Stormy Velvet will carry her to dignity," Ivy murmured, eyes glinting. "Let's show her how far dignity gets you in Vaughn country." Aurora smirked. "A bunny girl on a monster. Let's see how long her ears stay on." Within minutes, the sabotage was complete. The stall tags for Stormy Velvet and Blazeheart, both marked with silver clasps, were swapped. Stormy Velvet's name now adorned the stall of the Black Stallion 3 stalls down. A shadow in the barn, Blazeheart was a thing carved from fury. Standing 17 hands high, Blazeheart had a coat like oil-slick obsidian and a reputation for rage. 12 years old, a former champion bred for power and speed, he'd been banned from competition after fracturing a rider's spine during a championship 2 years ago. Rumor said he'd killed a stable hand in Buenos Aires, though no charges stuck. Most riders wouldn't go near him without tranquilizers or prayer. And yet, there he stood, still as stone, watching Sylvie with amber eyes that seemed too human in their intensity. Back outside, Ivy uploaded a cryptic photo of Sylvie walking toward the stalls, captioned, "Shark Bunny Girl goes pro," with a string of laughing emojis. The post exploded within minutes. Dozens of anonymous accounts reshared it, mocking Sylvie's outfit, her helmet, her gait. A parody account tagged @StableMascot was created in real time, already posting doctored images of her as a cartoon. The live stream broadcast from Vaughan Ridge zoomed in on her every step. In the farthest bleachers, Dale McLean watched the feed on his ancient phone. A proud man rarely shaken, he gripped the sides of the screen like it might fall apart. The image showed Sylvie brushing the side of a black stallion. Dale's brow furrowed. That wasn't Stormy Velvet. Back at the stalls, Marcus Yeats, the stablemaster, a quiet man in his 40s with calloused hands, sun-damaged skin, and a permanent stoop, approached Sylvie with a clipboard. He glanced at the chart, then at the stall she was standing beside. "You're here for Blazeheart?" he asked, his voice raspy but polite. Sylvie blinked. "No, Stormy Velvet." Marcus tapped his sheet. "Says Blazeheart, number 16. Sylvie hesitated. The black horse loomed behind her like a shadow cast from another world, but the tag in her hand matched the stall. "It's okay," she said softly. "He seems calm." Marcus didn't argue. He'd seen enough rich riders get bucked for correcting people with names that bought half the stadium. If the bunny-eared girl wanted to risk herself, that wasn't his war. Inside the grandstand, Aurora and Ivy joined Preston Norridge, a 26-year-old heir to a family oil fortune. With his windswept brown hair, snakeskin loafers, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes, Preston had made mocking newcomers his sport. He leaned over the railing, voice pitched to Carrie. $10 she doesn't make it 10 steps, he whispered. 50 if she screams. From the left, a new voice joined the fray. Sarah Quinn, 30, a former champion rider turned sports commentator, leaned in beside Preston. Tall and broad-shouldered with short black hair and an easy gait, Sarah wasn't cruel, but she was blunt. Her voice was smooth from years of training. She had been injured during a steeplechase fall years back, leaving a steel pin in her hip and a deeper wariness in her heart. "Don't bet against her yet," she said, eyes on the girl in white. "That one rides like she's got ghosts chasing her." Preston scoffed, but his fingers stilled over his phone. Sylvie opened the stall. Blazeheart did not move. His head remained low, ears flicking once. She stepped forward slowly, hand extended. The crowd, watching from their monitors and phones, held its breath. Then Blazeheart, impossibly let her touch his face. She fastened the bridle, mounted, and rode him into the light. The announcer's voice echoed through Vaughan Ridge like distant thunder. "Riders, prepare to enter the arena." Beneath the cloudy Oregon sky, the wind picked up across the highlands, ruffling flags and silk scarves and stirring the scent of approaching rain. It swept across the crowd, each face expectant, each phone lifted. The camera drones hovered like metal vultures. But on the dirt path leading to the open polo field, Sylvie McLean sat mounted on a horse whose name she didn't yet know. Blazeheart shifted beneath her with a pulse of restrained fire, muscles coiling under his black coat like molten rope. The stallion's ears flicked once, his amber eyes scanning the crowd. He didn't neigh, he didn't bolt. But Sylvie could feel it. Every inch of him was a storm waiting for lightning. Something was wrong. She had grown up among horses, some broken, some wild, some neither. And this one didn't carry the calm rhythm of Stormy Velvet. His breaths were shallower, his body hummed with silent resistance. Sylvie's fingers brushed his mane, then slipped to his neck. A long, pale scar traced the muscle near his shoulder, an old wound, ugly and purposeful. This wasn't Stormy Velvet. It couldn't be. Still, no one said a word. To her left, Aurora stood atop her own snow-white Andalusian, a horse named Argent Crest. Tall, proud, and draped in a silver saddle set with Swarovski crystals, Aurora looked like royalty carved from ice. She turned toward Sylvie, her smirk delicate but cruel. Ivy Kensington waved from the sidelines, phone in hand, broadcasting a live stream under the title, "The Bunny's Last Hop." "I guess she's going with the monster," Ivy whispered into her mic, her tones syrupy sweet. "Let's hope the bunny bounces." The crowd laughed. The laughter was always worse than the silence. Sterling Vaughn stepped forward from the grandstands, his tailored navy blazer rippling in the wind. His face, usually calm and polished, was unreadable now, jaw tight, brows knit, but his hands were empty. His silence was louder than Aurora's smirk, heavier than Ivy's mockery. He made no move to stop it. No one did. And Sylvie, still atop the stallion, leaned forward slightly and whispered into the beast's ear. Blazeheart flinched but didn't throw her, not yet. The murmurs around her peaked. Accusations, bets, mockery. That's when she sat up tall in her saddle and raised her voice, not to the horse, but to the crowd. "If I fall," she said clearly, "I'll walk away from Sterling Vaughn for good." The grandstand shifted as if punched. A gasp, a shiver, and then 100 camera lenses focused in like insects swarming light. "But if I ride this horse you've all tricked me into saddling, and I finish, I don't want your applause. I want your silence. For good." The field dropped into stunned stillness. Ivy's stream went viral in seconds. Aurora's smile flickered. Even Sterling blinked. At the judges' table, a man in a forest green coat stood slowly. Samuel Rusk, mid-60s, head of officiating for the Western Equestrian Council. Tall and thin, he looked like an old tree, dignified, unbending. He was known for his fairness, his love for clean riding, and his distrust of drama. He narrowed his gray eyes and scribbled something in his notepad. At the same table sat Loretta Wild, the council's PR director. In her 40s, with thick, coiled hair dyed violet and a wardrobe of power suits, Loretta had once been a rider herself before a spinal injury ended her career. She leaned toward Rusk, her tone low. "This girl's either insane," she said, "or about to become a headline." "Maybe both," Rusk muttered. Back in the ring, Blazeheart pawed the ground, his hooves slicing up clumps of soft grass. He knew what came next. He always did. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was Sylvie. The trumpet signaled the start. Aurora dashed forward, leading the riders in a choreographed display, an opening lap to show skill, grace, elegance. The others followed, their horses trained to canter, spin, and leap in synchronized rhythm. But Sylvie? She didn't leap. She launched. Blazeheart erupted beneath her like an explosion, rearing onto his hind legs so high that gasps rippled through the crowd. His hooves clawed the sky, and for one terrifying heartbeat, Sylvie was silhouetted against the clouds, helmet tilted, braid flying, eyes narrowed. Then they landed. She gripped with her thighs, heels pressed, arms bent, and leaned forward, not to dominate the beast, but to move with him. Her breath found his breath. Her rhythm found his thunder. And they ran. Behind the arena, a side plot unfolded. Tanner Lynn, a 19-year-old stable hand with wide eyes and a crooked jaw from a riding fall years ago, watched the event unfold from a service monitor near the feed barn. He had been the one to prepare Blazeheart that morning, and he knew that Tag had been wrong. He'd been afraid to speak. He worked minimum wage, slept in a bunk above the hay bales, and had once been threatened with firing for correcting Ivy's tack fitting. But now he saw her live stream, her grin, the swapped tags. Tanner ran. Inside the announcer's booth, Sarah Quinn stood up from her mic as the crowd howled. She stared, stunned, as Sylvie began her second lap. Still riding, still guiding, Blazeheart now no longer bucking but charging ahead like a warhorse unleashed. "She's not riding it," Sarah whispered. "She's dancing with it." Preston Norridge, behind her, cursed under his breath. In the bleachers, Dale McLean crushed his hat in his hands, whispering only one word: "Atta girl." The sky over Bend began to break apart, slivers of sunlight slicing through the thinning cloud cover as if the heavens themselves were watching. The field, once a cathedral of mockery, fell into stunned silence. Sylvie McLean was no longer riding for survival. She was riding like she belonged. Blazeheart surged beneath her, hooves pounding the turf with fury and precision. The stallion's mane streamed behind like a storm banner. Each twist of his body was wild and unyielding, but Sylvie matched him, move for move, not with force but with finesse. She didn't tame him. She listened to him. Lap by lap, her body folded into his rhythm. At each sharp turn, she leaned not as a command, but as a whisper. At every flare of his nostrils or toss of his head, she answered with a subtle shift in grip or breath. It wasn't just technique, it was something older, something instinctive. She wasn't breaking him. She was becoming part of him. In the judge's box, Loretta Wild pushed up her violet sunglasses, her eyes shining with something she hadn't felt in years: wonder. She turned to Samuel Rusk, who stood like a statue carved from stone. "She's doing the impossible," Loretta murmured, "and making it look like grace." Rusk didn't speak, but he nodded once, slow and deliberate, the nod of a man who'd seen greatness only a few times and knew it when it rode past. Meanwhile, in the VIP box, Sterling Vaughn stood motionless. His hands were clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. Around him, voices buzzed with confusion, amazement, and rapidly changing opinions. Sterling had always believed silence could protect the ones he loved. Now he saw what silence had cost Sylvie. Aurora Vaughn was 2 laps behind now. Her stallion, Argent Crest, huffed and fought her rein, unwilling to keep pace. The power she once displayed so effortlessly now looked desperate. Her crystal-studded saddle glinted in the sun, but it offered no crown today. Her face, usually so poised, was tight with disbelief. From the side of the arena, Ivy Kensington fumbled with her phone. The livestream comments were no longer mocking. They were screaming, "Bunny Queen. She's riding a beast and turning it into ballet. Never underestimate a girl in bunny ears." As Ivy's fingers trembled, her phone slipped, hitting the turf with a crack. She crouched to pick it up, but her hand hesitated when she looked up and saw Sylvie flying past again. White dress billowing, helmet tilted, the bunny ears proud and defiant. Beside her, Preston Norridge was no longer smirking. His bet had long since expired. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, eyes darting as if trying to locate the moment he lost control of the narrative. The camera drones hovered lower now, capturing close-ups of Sylvie's face. Eyes narrowed with focus, lips parted in calm breath, a faint glimmer of sweat on her temple. Not from fear, but from effort. The crowd, once roaring with ridicule, now held its breath with reverence. In a quiet corner of the bleachers, Dale McLean stood. Not clapping, not cheering, just standing with his weathered hands pressed together in front of his chest. He had taught Sylvie to ride by letting her fall. He had taught her that horses didn't respond to fear, but to belief. Now he watched his daughter carry both. On the outskirts of the event, Tanner Lynn burst into the security office, breathless. The security captain, a short, barrel-chested man named Rico Manzano, with gray stubble and a no-nonsense face, turned slowly from the wall of monitors. Rico had been in charge of security at Vaughan Ridge for a decade, known for his fairness and his quiet code of honor. A veteran of the Coast Guard and father of 4, he had no patience for elitist games. "She's on the wrong horse," Tanner said, chest heaving. They swapped the tags, Ivy and Aurora. Blazeheart was meant to stay in stall 3. Rico raised one eyebrow and calmly hit rewind on the camera feed. In silence, they watched the switch play out in grainy detail. Rico didn't ask why Tanner hadn't spoken up earlier. He saw the fear in the kid's eyes, and the courage it took to show up now. Rico pressed the intercom button and said only 2 words. "Send this to Rusk." Back in the ring, Sylvie approached the final turn. Blazeheart hadn't tried to buck in over 2 laps. His gallop was smooth now, his strides fluid. He wasn't a monster, he had simply never been met with patience. Sarah Quinn, watching from the announcer's booth, whispered into her mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing not just a ride, but a reckoning. Sylvie McLean isn't riding for approval. She's rewriting what this sport means." At the edge of the ring, Marla Jennings, a retired equine therapist in her 50s, with soft eyes and a history of working with trauma cases, both human and horse, stood with her arms crossed. She had been skeptical of the event's publicity, but now her voice cracked as she whispered, "That horse never needed to be broken. He just needed to be heard." The finish line drew near. Blazeheart's hooves thundered like a drumbeat of vindication. Sylvie leaned forward, not for speed, but in silent thanks. They crossed together. The crowd erupted, not with cheers but with something deeper: awe, respect, a breaking of something brittle in their hearts. Sterling stepped forward, face pale, then quickly stepped back. It wasn't his moment to claim. Dale McLean lowered his hands and whispered to the wind, "You did it, baby girl." The moment Blazeheart's hooves crossed the finish line, a strange quiet blanketed Vaughn Ridge. It was not the silence of disbelief or of breathlessness, but of surrender, a collective admission that something sacred had just happened. Sylvie McLean remained still in the saddle, her body tall, her hand gently stroking the stallion's neck as he slowed to a regal trot. The crowd stood frozen, caught between apology and awe. Blazeheart, once the monster of whispered tales and shattered reputations, lowered his head, not in defeat, but in respect. The bunny-eared girl on his back had not forced him into obedience. She had listened, she had trusted, and in return, the beast had bowed. Sterling Vaughn stepped forward, no longer shielded by his tailored image or calculated silence. His chest rose as he drew in a breath that was long overdue. His voice, when it rang through the field, was clear, deep, and resonant, like a verdict. "I stayed silent too long," he said, his dark eyes sweeping the crowd. "I thought love didn't need defending. I thought the truth would be enough. But silence in the face of cruelty is its own betrayal." He turned to the judge's box and lifted his phone. On the screen played a clear video from the security feed. Marcus Yeats's camera angle showing the exact moment Aurora Vaughn and Ivy Kensington switched the stall name tags. Behind him, Rico Manzano, arms crossed, nodded grimly. Tanner Lynn stood beside him, no longer trembling, his face set with the steady defiance of someone who had finally found courage. "I have the video," Sterling continued. "I have statements from the stablemaster, and from Tanner Lynn, who watched in silence and then chose truth. That's more than can be said for some of you." He turned to the main pavilion. Aurora Vaughn stood stiff, her blonde braid undone, cheeks drained of color. Ivy, half hidden behind a group of investors, stared at her cracked phone like it might rescue her. "As of today," Sterling declared, "Aurora Vaughn is banned from all Vaughn Ridge events and competitions. Effective immediately, her sponsorships under the Vaughn name are revoked." Aurora gasped. The sound was small. She looked to her father, Charles Vaughn, a stoic man with hawkish features and a platinum tie, who merely adjusted his cufflink and looked away. Aurora's legacy, polished and precious, shattered with that silence. Sterling turned next to Ivy. "And Ivy Kensington, your advertising contracts with Vaughn and Holloway are terminated. Any use of our branding in your influencer materials will be considered intellectual property theft." He glanced at the lawyers already moving toward her. Ivy didn't argue. She didn't scream. She simply crumpled where she stood, her lavender vest stained with sweat and dirt. Preston Norridge shrank back into the seats. Loretta Wilde raised her brows in approval. Samuel Rusk began stamping papers. But Sterling wasn't finished. He faced the audience once more. "For the rest of you, who whispered behind your fans and screens, who laughed when she walked in with bunny ears and dared to love out loud, go check your trust funds. See who signs your dividends. I will not allow a woman of courage, integrity, and unshakable grace to be treated like a joke." The silence broke into thunderous applause. Sylvie dismounted. Blazeheart stood still, his breath steady, his flanks gleaming with sweat. She walked to Sterling without a word, her helmet tucked under her arm. Her white dress clung damp against her, dirt-streaked but still radiant. Her bunny ears bent slightly with wear. Sterling knelt before her. From his pocket, he drew a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not a gaudy gemstone, but a silver band engraved with 3 simple words. She never bowed. "I was a fool," he said. "But if you'll still have me, I want the world to know who truly belongs on this field." Sylvie didn't speak. She only nodded once, and the field erupted. 3 days later, the world knew her name. Clips of Sylvie's ride went viral across platforms. Headlines praised her as the girl who tamed Blazeheart. The Bunny Queen trend overtook hashtags from Fashion Week, political scandals, even film premieres. Commentators across networks interviewed Sarah Quinn, who simply said, "I've ridden champions. I've never seen what I saw that day." At Vaughn Ridge, the staff installed a bronze plaque at the center of the field. It read, "Sylvie McLean, conqueror of Blazeheart, she never bowed." At the dedication ceremony, an unlikely speaker took the microphone. Marla Jennings, the retired therapist whose presence had gone unnoticed during the match, stood in a navy dress with mud still on her boots. "She didn't tame a beast," Marla said. "She showed us how we've become beasts to each other. She reminded us what gentleness can do." Dale McLean stood proudly in the front row, arms crossed. He was wearing a new hat. The old one he'd told Sylvie had done its job. That night, Sterling's proposal video trended again. It wasn't the ring that drew views, it was the way Sylvie had smiled, small and quiet, and reached up to adjust her bunny ears before saying yes. In a world that often rewards appearance over authenticity, Sylvie McLean reminded us that quiet strength can shake the loudest rooms. She didn't fight with anger, nor seek revenge. She chose dignity, skill, and courage, and in doing so turned mockery into respect and isolation into legend. Blazeheart wasn't tamed by force, he was understood. And in that understanding, a deeper truth was revealed. The fiercest hearts aren't conquered, they are earned. How many times have we been judged by what we wear, where we're from, or what others assume we cannot do? Like Sylvie, we each carry battles unseen by the world. But in moments of doubt, when the crowd whispers that we don't belong, remember, belief in yourself, consistency in your values, and compassion in your strength are what truly turn moments into legacies. You don't need to roar to be powerful. Sometimes showing up with quiet courage is the loudest thing of all. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe a little more in second chances and silent strength, share it with someone who needs that reminder. Leave a comment below and tell us your favorite moment or how you've overcome a challenge like Sylvie. And if you want more stories that celebrate the wild, the brave, and the beautifully underestimated, subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.